The afternoon of my brother's wedding reception at the Langham Hotel in downtown Boston. I walked into the grand ballroom in the dusty rose gown my mother had chosen for me, holding a small clutch and a place card she had handed me 3 minutes earlier. And I watched as the wedding coordinator gently steered me past the 28 round tables of family and friends, past the head table where my brother and his new wife were laughing, and out of the ballroom entirely, down a long carpeted corridor, to a single folding chair and a card table that had been set up next to a fire extinguisher and a sign pointing to the emergency stairwell. My mother had seated me in the service hallway at my only brother's wedding. The place card on the table said, "Tessa, sister." Before I tell you what happened 20 minutes later when the general manager of the Langham Hotel walked down that corridor in his charcoal suit and saw me sitting there in a formal gown eating a dinner roll off a paper plate, I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you watching this from tonight? And have you ever been physically removed from a room that was supposed to belong to you just as much as everyone else? Drop it in the comments. I am telling this story because some nights it still feels like I dreamed it, and hearing from someone else who has lived through a similar moment always reminds me that it was real. My name is Tessa. I'm 34 years old, and I was raised in a small, tidy town in the Boston suburbs called Weston, in a family that looked, from every possible angle, exactly like the kind of family other people wanted to be. My father, Barnaby, was a partner at one of the oldest wealth management firms in New England, and my mother, Celestine, was a former ballerina who had quietly transformed herself, after her dancing career ended, into the kind of suburban matriarch who ran 3 charity committees and wrote handwritten thank you notes on cream-colored Crane stationery. My older brother, Weatherby, whose name I have spent my entire life defending against confused strangers, was 2 years older than me and had been, since the day he was born, the singular focus of my mother's devotion. I want to be careful about how I describe Weatherby, because the truth is I love my brother, and he is not the antagonist of this story. My brother is charming, slightly spoiled, extremely handsome, not particularly curious about other people's lives, and entirely willing to let my mother run his life for him well into his 30s. He is a decent man who has never had to become a strong one, because my mother has always been strong on his behalf. The antagonist of this story, the person who made every decision that mattered in the lead-up to that reception, was my mother. My mother had never known what to do with me. I was not a performing child. I did not dance. I was tall and shy and slightly awkward, with my father's dark eyes and his serious eyebrows and a tendency to read novels in the corner at family parties. I was, by every measurement my mother cared about, a disappointment. I was aware of this disappointment by the time I was 6. I remember the exact moment I understood it. We were at a ballet studio in Wellesley, where my mother had signed me up for my first recital, and I had forgotten the steps halfway through, and I had frozen on the stage in my pink tutu, and I had watched my mother from the audience, and I had seen very clearly the expression that crossed her face when her daughter failed in public. It was not concern. It was not sympathy. It was embarrassment, pure, unmistakable embarrassment. I was 6 years old, and I understood in that moment that my mother was a woman who measured her children by the reflection they cast on her, and that my reflection was not one she wanted. I grew up. I stopped trying to be a ballerina. I started trying to be something I could be good at instead, which turned out to be academics. I studied hard. I went to Wellesley College on scholarship. I got a master's degree in urban planning from MIT. I took a job as a city planner for the city of Cambridge, and then, 6 years ago, I founded my own small consulting firm that works with small and mid-sized New England towns on transportation planning and pedestrian safety. My firm is called Compass Planning, and we have 11 employees, and last year we did about $3 million in revenue, which is not a staggering amount by corporate standards, but which is a respectable small business by any reasonable measure. My mother has never, in 10 years, been able to remember the name of my company correctly. She calls it that transportation thing Tessa does. When people at her charity events ask her what I do, she tells them I work for the government, which is not accurate. When I try to correct her, she waves me off and tells me that nobody cares about the details. Weatherby, meanwhile, had always lived the life my mother had. Essayed for him. He went to Bowdoin. He got an MBA at Dartmouth. He joined a consulting firm in Boston and was promoted twice by the time he was 30. He dated a series of women my mother approved of, and 3 years ago, he got engaged to a woman named Philippa Marchetti, whose family owned a chain of jewelry stores across New England and who had been on the Boston social scene since she was a teenager. Philippa was blonde, impeccable, and carried herself with the confidence of a woman who had never once in her life been told she was not enough. My mother had adored her from the moment they met. My mother had, in fact, referred to Philippa in my presence on multiple occasions as the daughter I always wanted. I let that one go. I had been letting things like that go for 34 years. The wedding had been in the planning stages for 14 months. My mother had appointed herself the unofficial co-planner, working alongside Philippa's mother and the 2 wedding planners they had hired for the event. I had been asked to be a bridesmaid, which I accepted because it would have been too awkward to refuse, and I had participated in the bridal shower and the bachelorette weekend in Newport and the rehearsal dinner, all of which had been perfectly pleasant in the distant way that events with Philippa's crowd always were for me. I was the sister-in-law. I was included without being included. I was present without being seen. A week before the wedding, my mother called me. It was a Tuesday evening. I was in my apartment in Cambridge, eating reheated lentil soup at my kitchen counter. "Tessa, sweetheart, I need to talk to you about the reception." "Okay, Mom, what's up?" "There has been a small adjustment to the seating. Philippa's extended family from Italy all confirmed at the last minute, and we suddenly have 12 more people than the ballroom is set to accommodate. The wedding planners have been absolutely frantic about it. We have had to make some very difficult decisions." "Difficult decisions like what?" "Well, one of the decisions is that we cannot seat you at the family table with your father and me. I know, sweetheart, I know it is not ideal. But Philippa's grandmother needs to be at the family table, and her 2 aunts, and her father's business partner who is basically family to them, and we simply do not have the room. We have talked about it extensively." "Where are you putting me?" There was a pause. My mother was gathering herself. "The wedding planners have set up a small additional seating area just outside the ballroom, in the corridor. It is very nice, Tessa. The hotel has a beautiful carpeted hallway, and they are going to put a small table and chair there so that you can have your meal in privacy. You will be able to hear the music from the ballroom. The waiters will bring you the same food everyone else is having. And honestly, sweetheart, you will probably be more comfortable out there than stuck at a loud table with people you do not know." I put my spoon down. I looked at the bowl of lentil soup. I looked at the small framed photograph on my refrigerator, which was a picture of my grandmother Mabel, my father's mother, who had died 6 years earlier and had been, for most of my life, the only person in my family who had consistently made me feel like a real human being. "Mom, you want me to eat my brother's wedding dinner in a hallway?" "Tessa, please do not make this into something. It is a corridor, not a hallway. It is beautifully appointed. The Langham is a 5-star hotel. Everything they do is beautiful." "Mom, I am the groom's sister. There is no world in which the groom's sister eats in a corridor at a wedding reception. That is not a seating arrangement. That is being removed from the event." "Tessa, I need you to be reasonable about this. Philippa's family has come a very long way, and they are used to being treated a certain way, and we cannot have any disruption to the evening. If you make a fuss about this, you are going to embarrass your brother, and you are going to embarrass me, and you are going to ruin what is supposed to be the most important night of Weatherby's life. Please just do this one thing for your brother. Please." "Does Weatherby know about this?" A longer pause. "Your brother is so stressed about the wedding that I have not wanted to bother him with the seating details. He trusts me to handle it. So he does not know. He will be fine with whatever I decide. He always is." I was quiet for a long time. I looked at my lentil soup, which had gone cold. I thought about the 6-year-old girl on the ballet stage in Wellesley. I thought about my grandmother, Mabel. I thought about the specific weight of a request like this, made by a mother to her adult daughter, a week before a family wedding. I understood very clearly that there was no argument I could make that would change my mother's mind. I also understood that I had a decision to make, and I had out 3 seconds to make it. Okay, Mom, I will sit in the corridor. Thank you, Tessa. I knew I could count on you. She hung up. I sat at my kitchen counter for a long time. I did not cry. I had passed the point of crying over my mother a very long time ago. Instead, I did something I should have done years earlier. I opened my laptop and I started looking up the Langham Hotel. I looked at the website. I looked at the photos of the ballroom. I looked at the corridor outside the ballroom. I looked at the leadership page of the hotel, and I found a photograph of the general manager, a man named Davin Okonkwo, who had taken the position 2 years earlier after spending 15 years with the Langham Hotel Group in London and Hong Kong. I read his bio. He had a degree from the Hotel Management School at Cornell. He had been named to a list of the top hospitality leaders in New England in the previous year. He looked, from his professional headshot, like the kind of hotel general manager who took his role seriously. I closed the laptop. I made a cup of tea. I did not do anything else that night. I did not call anyone. I did not write an email. I simply absorbed the information my mother had given me and decided that I would let the situation unfold the way my mother had designed it to unfold, and that I would see what happened. I flew back from a work trip to Portland, Maine, the day before the wedding. I had dinner with Philippa's bridal party at a restaurant in the Back Bay, which was fine. I did not mention the corridor situation to any of them. I slept at my parents' house in Weston that night, in my childhood bedroom, which my mother had converted into a guest room 9 years earlier. The morning of the wedding, I got my hair done with the bridesmaids. I got my makeup done. I put on the dusty rose gown my mother had chosen for all of us, which was pretty but not particularly flattering. I attended the ceremony at the church. I walked down the aisle in front of Philippa. I watched my brother marry her. He cried a little during his vows. Philippa glowed. The whole thing was as beautiful as a wedding is supposed to be. I felt, watching my brother in his tuxedo, a genuine affection for him that I had not felt in a long time, because I loved Weatherby, despite all of it, and I wanted him to be happy. After the ceremony, we all drove to the Langham Hotel for the reception. I rode in the car with 3 of Philippa's bridesmaids, none of whom I knew well, and I listened to them gossip about mutual friends. I got out of the car at the hotel. I walked into the lobby in my dusty rose gown and my pinned-up hair, and I went to the small reception area where guests were checking in for the dinner portion of the wedding. A young woman in a black suit, the Langham's wedding coordinator, was holding a stack of place cards. My mother appeared beside her almost immediately, looking beautiful in her midnight green gown, and handed me my place card with a small, tight, apologetic smile. "Sweetheart, here is your card. Brenna is going to show you to your table. I will see you later." The place card said Tessa, sister. It did not have a table number on it. It just said sister. I almost laughed. Brenna, the young wedding coordinator, looked at the card, looked at me, looked back at the card, and then looked around the small reception area with a slightly panicked expression. I could tell, immediately, that she had not been told about this part of the plan. She was not the person who had set up the folding chair. Someone else had done that, and it had been done without her knowledge. Okay, Ms. Whitmore, let me just check on this real quick. If you can wait right here for 1 minute. Of course. She walked away. I stood in the small reception area holding my place card and my clutch, and I watched the other guests pouring into the ballroom. I saw my mother on the far side of the room laughing with Philippa's aunts. I saw my father talking to one of his golf partners. I saw Weatherby and Philippa taking photographs with a group of cousins. Nobody was looking at me. Nobody had noticed me standing there. Brenna came back. Her face was carefully composed in the professional way that hotel staff compose their faces when they have just been handed something distasteful by management. "Ms. Whitmore, I am so sorry to do this, but your mother has asked me to seat you in the corridor just outside the ballroom. If you would follow me, please." "Lead the way, Brenna." I followed her. She walked me out of the main reception area, down a long carpeted corridor with dark wood paneling and framed art on the walls, past a restroom sign, past a service door, past a fire extinguisher, and around a corner to a small nook where a single folding card table had been set up with a white paper tablecloth and a single folding chair. There was a paper plate, a set of plastic utensils, and a water glass. There was no centerpiece. There was no candle. There was a small sign on the wall next to the chair pointing to the emergency stairwell. I looked at the setup. Brenna looked at the setup. She looked at my dusty rose gown. She looked at my face. Her professional composure was cracking. "Ms. Whitmore, I want you to know that I was not the one who set this up. I did not know this was happening until 15 minutes ago. I think there has been a miscommunication. Please, let me go speak with my manager about this. I am sure we can find you a proper seat in the ballroom." "Brenna, it is okay. My mother made this decision. She does not want me at the family table. You do not need to involve your manager." "Ms. Whitmore, I am absolutely involving my manager. This is not acceptable. This is not how the Langham treats guests. This is not how we treat anyone. Please, sit here for 5 minutes and I will be right back." She hurried off. I sat down at the folding card table. I looked at the paper plate. I looked at the emergency stairwell sign. I felt in that moment a kind of surreal calm. I had known this was coming. I had spent the last week preparing myself for it. And now, sitting in a hallway in a dusty rose gown with a plastic fork, I felt something that was not quite anger and was not quite sadness. It was a clean, cold clarity. I was finally seeing my family for exactly what they were, and the seeing felt, in a strange way, like relief. A waiter came by and placed a bread basket on my little table, along with a small dish of butter. He did not make eye contact with me. He walked away quickly, the way people walk away from a difficult scene. I took a dinner roll out of the basket and I started to butter it, and I was thinking absurdly about whether this would be the most memorable dinner of my life when I heard footsteps coming down the corridor. Serious, measured, unhurried footsteps. I looked up. A tall man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit was walking toward me. He was in his mid-40s, with close-cropped dark hair and an unreadable professional expression. He had a small gold pin on his lapel that read General Manager. Brenna was walking beside him, talking quickly and quietly. He stopped in front of my little table. He looked at the folding chair. He looked at the paper plate. He looked at the fire extinguisher. He looked at me. And then, very slowly, very deliberately, he removed the pin from his lapel, looked at it for a moment, and placed it in his jacket pocket. It was the first time I had ever seen someone physically set aside their professional role in real time. Then he spoke. "Ms. Whitmore, my name is Davin Okonkwo. I am the general manager of the Langham Boston. I apologize for approaching you without introducing myself first. I have just been informed by my wedding coordinator that a member of the wedding party has seated you in a service corridor for this evening's reception. I would like to confirm with you directly, because I do not want there to be any misunderstanding. Is it correct that your mother asked the hotel to place you here, rather than at a table in the ballroom?" "Yes, that is correct." "And you are the sister of the groom?" "Yes." "And the decision to seat you here was not made by you, or by my staff, but by your mother?" "Yes." He nodded once. He looked at the corridor. He looked back at me. His face had not changed much, but there was something happening in his eyes that I have thought about many times in the years since that night. It was the look of a professional who had been asked, in a very specific moment, whether he was going to stand up for something or let it pass. "Ms. Whitmore, I would like to say something to you, and I would like you to hear me clearly before I take any action. In 15 years of running hotels on 3 continents, I have never seen a member of the immediate family of a wedding party seated in a hallway. I have seen difficult family dynamics. I have seen seating disputes. I have seen guests request small tables and intimate arrangements. I have never, not once, seen a sister of the groom seated next to an emergency stairwell at her own brother's wedding. This is not a seating arrangement. This is something else. I will not name what it is, but I will not let it stand in my hotel. Not tonight. Not ever." I did not know what to say. I looked at him. I looked at Brenna, who was nodding behind him with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Okonkwo, I appreciate what you are saying, but I do not want to cause a scene at my brother's wedding. My mother made her decision. If I go into the ballroom now, it will become an enormous disruption. I do not want to hurt Weatherby's night. Ms. Whitmore, I understand your concern and I respect your instinct to protect your brother, but I want you to consider something. You did not cause this. You did not make this decision. You arrived at my hotel tonight as a guest, dressed for a wedding, expecting to be seated with your family. The disruption to your brother's night has already occurred. It occurred the moment your mother handed you that place card. My role, as the general manager of this hotel, is to restore the dignity of my guests when the dignity has been damaged. I cannot correct what your mother has done, but I can correct what this hotel is allowing. May I have your permission to take action? I sat there in the folding chair, holding a buttered dinner roll, and I looked up at this stranger who had walked down a hallway to find me. And I thought about the 6-year-old on the ballet stage in Wellesley. And I thought about my grandmother Mabel. And I thought about every single family dinner I had spent making myself small. And I realized, with a force I had not expected, that I was 34 years old and I was tired of being small. And that sometimes a stranger shows up in a corridor and offers you a door you did not know you could open. Yes, Mr. Okonkwo, you have my permission. Thank you. Please stay here for 3 minutes. I am going to return with my staff, and we are going to escort you into the ballroom and seat you properly. I would like to do this in a way that is dignified and minimally disruptive. Can you trust me to handle it? I can. He nodded. He turned to Brenna. Please arrange for an additional place setting at the head table next to the groom. I do not care what you have to do to make space. Displace whatever needs to be displaced. If there is pushback, send them to me. Yes, Mr. Okonkwo. He walked away, his footsteps measured, his back straight. Brenna remained with me for a moment. She was smiling a small, stunned smile. Ms. Whitmore, I have worked at this hotel for 4 years. I have never seen him do anything like this. He is a kind man. He is more than kind. He's going to make sure you are treated the way you should be treated. I am so sorry this happened to you. Thank you, Brenna. She left to execute his instructions. I sat alone in the corridor for another 2 minutes. I put the buttered dinner roll back on the paper plate. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked at my own reflection in the glass of a framed piece of art on the wall opposite me, and I almost did not recognize the woman looking back. She looked calm. She looked present. She looked like a woman who had been waiting a very long time for this moment. At exactly 3 minutes, Davin Okonkwo returned. He was accompanied by Brenna and by 2 other members of his staff. He extended his arm to me, in the formal way of a man escorting a lady into a dining room in another century, and he said, Ms. Whitmore, please allow me. I stood up. I took his arm, and together, Davin Okonkwo and I walked down the long carpeted corridor, past the fire extinguisher, past the restroom sign, past the service door, back into the main reception hall, and toward the double doors of the grand ballroom. The string quartet was playing inside. I could hear laughter. I could hear the clink of champagne flutes. The cocktail hour was winding down and people were finding their seats for dinner. Davin Okonkwo opened the doors of the ballroom himself. We walked in together. I was on his arm, in my dusty rose gown, and he walked me, slowly, straight across the ballroom floor, between the round tables, past hundreds of guests who turned to watch the hotel general manager escorting a woman in formal wear across the room. My mother saw us first. I watched her face from across the ballroom. She was at the family table, holding a champagne flute, mid-laugh, and her expression shifted in stages. First confusion, then dawning horror. Then the pale, bloodless whiteness of a woman who realized, in a single second, that something had gone very wrong with her plan. My brother Weatherby looked up next. He was seated at the head table, which had been set up on a slightly raised dais at the front of the ballroom. He looked at me. He looked at Davin Okonkwo. He looked at my face. I watched my brother's expression go through a very specific sequence. Confusion, then realization, then a kind of slow, horrified understanding of what he was actually looking at. His hand, which had been holding Philippa's hand, went slack. Davin Okonkwo walked me to the head table. He did not stop to explain anything to anyone along the way. He walked me directly to the head table, where his staff had already cleared a place setting and added a new chair immediately to the right of the groom. He pulled out the chair himself. He seated me. Then he did something I had not expected. He picked up a microphone that was sitting on the head table, the microphone that had been set up for the toasts later in the evening, and he turned it on, and he tapped it once, and the ballroom went quiet. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Davin Okonkwo. I am the general manager of the Langham Boston. I apologize for the interruption. I will be very brief. This evening, a member of my staff informed me that a guest of this W. Edding had been seated in a service corridor outside the ballroom. The guest was the sister of the groom. I want to be clear with every person in this room that this is not an arrangement my hotel was aware of or had approved, and it is not an arrangement that will stand in any hotel I manage. Ms. Whitmore, the sister of the groom, has been escorted into the ballroom and seated at the head table, where she belongs. I want to take this opportunity to welcome her to the Langham and to apologize on behalf of this hotel for the experience she has had this evening. Thank you. I will not interrupt you again." He set the microphone down. He nodded once to me, and then he walked out of the ballroom the same way he had come in, his staff following him, his back perfectly straight, leaving the entire room in absolute silence. For about 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then my brother Weatherby stood up. He turned to face me. His eyes were wet. And in front of his new wife, his new in-laws, and hundreds of guests, my brother said, loud enough for the nearest 10 tables to hear, "Tessa, I had no idea. I swear to God I had no idea. I am so sorry. I am so sorry." Then he put his hand on my shoulder, and he sat back down, and he picked up his wife's hand again, and Philippa, who had also been watching all of this with an expression of gradually mounting horror, said something very quietly to Weatherby that I could not hear, but which made him nod. My mother was still sitting at the family table. She was staring at her plate. My father was staring at her. Philippa's parents were staring at my mother with an expression I had never seen before, the expression of wealthy people who had just realized that the family their daughter had married into had a darkness they had not been warned about. The rest of the evening unfolded. I sat at the head table next to my brother. I ate the same dinner as everyone else. I gave a small toast to Weatherby and Philippa when my turn came, a short, warm toast about how much I loved my brother and how happy I was to welcome Philippa to the family. The guests clapped. Philippa came over to me afterward during a lull in the music, and she sat down in my brother's empty chair and she said very quietly, "Tessa, I am so sorry. I did not know. I would never have allowed this. When Weatherby and I get back from the honeymoon, I am taking you to dinner, just the two of us, and we are going to actually get to know each other. Is that okay?" I told her it was okay. I meant it. My mother did not speak to me for the rest of the evening. She did not look at me. When the reception ended at midnight and the guests began to leave, I saw her standing near the coat check with my father, her face still pale, her posture rigid. I walked past her without stopping. I took a taxi back to my apartment in Cambridge by myself because my mother had driven me to the hotel and I did not want to ride back with her. My father called me the next morning at 8 a.m. I answered. "Tessa, it's Dad." "Hi, Dad." "Tessa, I did not know. I want you to know that. I swear to God I did not know what your mother had done until I saw you walking into the ballroom on that man's arm. I have spent the entire night thinking about this. I have spent the entire night thinking about a lot of things, actually, and I want to talk to you about them, but not over the phone. Would you meet me for coffee this morning? I will drive to Cambridge." My father and I met at a small cafe near my apartment. My father, who had never in my life been an emotionally direct man, sat across from me at a small round table and cried openly, and he apologized for 34 years of things he should have said and had not said, and he told me that he had been a coward in his own marriage, and that he had let my mother treat me differently than she treated Weatherby my entire life, because it was easier than confronting her. He told me he was going to confront her now, and that he was going to have a very different kind of conversation with her going forward, and that he did not expect me to forgive him quickly, but that he was going to spend the rest of his life trying to be the father he should have been. I told my father that I heard him. I did not promise him forgiveness, because I am not a woman who gives forgiveness cheaply, but I told him I was willing to see how things went. My mother did not contact me for 11 days. When she finally did, she called and left a long, rambling voicemail that included multiple attempts at explanation, multiple small apologies folded into excuses, and one moment near the end where her voice broke and she said, "Tessa, I do not know why I am the way I am with you. I have been thinking about it every day since the wedding. I need help. I am going to see a therapist. I do not expect you to come back to me until I have done the work." That sentence, more than anything else, was what convinced me that something had actually shifted in her. My mother had never in her life used the phrase, "do the work," in any emotional context. I did not respond to the voicemail for 2 months. Then I sent her a short email telling her I was willing to have a phone call if she wanted one. We had the phone call. It was awkward. We have had many phone calls since then, and some of them have been less awkward. My mother did start seeing a therapist, and she has been seeing one for over 2 years now, and she is, very slowly, becoming a slightly different person than the one who handed me that place card at the Langham. We are not close. We may never be close, but we are not nothing, and given where we were, that is something. Weatherby and Philippa had me over to dinner 3 times in the first 6 months after they returned from their honeymoon. Philippa kept her word. We are friends now, in the small, careful way that sisters-in-law can be friends when they have decided to choose each other despite the family they share. Weatherby apologized to me in person at that first dinner, and we talked for a long time about our childhood, and about things neither of us had ever said to each other. My brother, I discovered, had always sensed that my mother treated me differently, but he had never known what to do about it, and he had taken the easier path of not asking questions. He is trying to ask questions now. Davin Okonkwo, the general manager of the Langham, sent me a handwritten note 3 days after the wedding. The note was on cream-colored hotel stationery, and it said, "Ms. Whitmore, it was my honor to walk you into that ballroom. Please consider yourself a personal guest of the Langham Boston for any future visit. I hope our paths will cross again under happier circumstances. With deep respect, Davin Okonkwo." I have kept the note in a small wooden box on my dresser ever since. On hard days, I take it out and I read it. Here is what I have learned. Some families will physically remove you from rooms where you belong, and they will do it with a small apologetic smile, and they will tell you they are sorry and that they had no choice, and the whole time they will be choosing it. You cannot argue your way back into those rooms. You can only hope that a stranger with his own sense of dignity will walk down the hallway where they put you, and recognize what he is seeing, and decide, in a single second, to make a different choice than the people who share your last name. Not every hallway will have a Davin Okonkwo in it, but some will. And if you are lucky enough to meet him, you take his arm, and you walk with him back into the room, and you sit down in the seat that was always supposed to be yours, and you eat your dinner with your head up. If this story moved you tonight, please hit that like button, because every like helps this story reach another woman who has been quietly removed from rooms where she was supposed to belong. Drop a comment and tell me, has a total stranger ever stood up for you in a moment when your own family would not? I read every single comment, and I promise yours will be seen. And if you want to hear more true stories like mine, please subscribe and turn on the bell, because I share a new story every week. Take care of yourselves out there tonight. And remember, the corridor is not your table. The corridor is just the place your family sent you to wait for someone to come find you. Let them come find you, then walk back in.